Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting episode of Learning to Code in Unity. Today we're going to be talking about the UI system in Unity, and specifically how to add UI elements to your scene and how to interact with text elements. So let's take a look at what we have so far. Right now I have something in here called Event System. Don't worry about that. But in here I have just a new project with a camera and a light. That's all. So what we're going to explore, if we go to Game Objects, we are going to explore this UI section. These are all of the UI elements in our field. Now, for those of you who may not know, UI stands for User Interface, and it's basically all of the components that a user can interact with. Things like buttons, text, heads-up displays, all of those things we would consider to be part of the UI. Granted, there are things that we can do without the Unity UI system that would still be part of the UI, like mini-maps, or targeting reticules, or things like that. But the UI components, or the UI game objects specifically, are specially designed to function in a certain way to provide a consistent and pleasing user interface to the player. So these are all the different types that we have in Unity. We have text, image, button, toggle, slider, all kinds of typical UI elements. We have canvas, panel, and scroll view. We're not going to worry about these guys down at the bottom. We're going to start by adding a text UI element. Now, there's a few peculiar things about the UI system in Unity. First of all, it does not function like the rest of Unity. Let me find my camera here. Here's my camera. Normally, we would place objects in front of our camera, and that would be how we would set up our scene. A UI works on a totally different layer, utilizing something called the canvas. So if I add a text element, the first thing that you'll notice is not only did it add text, but it also added something called a canvas. A canvas is a special UI element that is the parent of all other UI elements. See that here. So we cannot add other UI elements to the scene without also having a canvas. And as you just saw, if I try to add my first UI element, like text, it will automatically add a canvas for me if there isn't one already. So let's take a look at exactly what the canvas does. Notice, first of all, that the canvas is really, really big. So we're going to zoom out so we can see what's going on here. Zoom way out so that we can see our canvas. Now, the canvas isn't actually this big in the game. If I select, notice that new text appears partway down the screen when working with my canvas. If I click on the camera, or if I preview, let's actually preview the game. If I preview the game, you can see that new text appears in about the same location as it does on my canvas. Even though the canvas is much, much larger than the camera, it still ends up filling the entire space. If we click on the canvas, we will also notice that the canvas doesn't have the typical transform elements. A canvas has a special type of transform called a rect transform. And what that means is that the canvas is positioned in such a way that it always fills the entire screen. So I'm going to add a little note of that here. Canvas is special in that it fills the screen always. So what we're looking at when we go to our scene view, when we stop our game, what we're looking at here, even though the canvas looks gigantic, we're actually looking at a preview of what the camera will look like, or what the camera will see. So if I click on the text element, I can move the text around, and it should change where it is in my game. We can see that now new text is partway up the screen because I moved it. So this is good for a couple of reasons. The first reason it's good is it means that we don't have to worry about positioning our canvas correctly in our camera. Unity takes care of that for us. But the second thing that we have is something called an aspect ratio. And an aspect ratio basically simulates screen sizes. And what I want to show you is that we've never actually set one. We've been working with something called free aspect, which basically just says as big as the Unity editor. But I can change this to be 16:9 aspect ratio. So this is that screen size. I can change it to 4:3, which is an even smaller aspect ratio. And notice that the text stays in the same place. So it fills the screen, but it always fills the same, it always meets the same location. Why does that happen? Well, there's a very special thing called an anchor, which we can see right here. This guy is an anchor, and normally it starts right in the middle of our canvas. But what the anchor does is it provides a relative point for my text to anchor to. So if we look at the values for the text, notice that the position of the text is -91, 57, and 0. What that means is my text is -91. It's 91 pixels to the left of my anchor, and it's 57 pixels above my anchor. So it's going off of the anchor point, not the camera position or the world position. If I click on something like my camera has the typical position values. This is relative to the global space. This is on Unity's global positioning system. Text is hooked, any UI component is hooked up to an anchor. So if we add a little note here for anchors, anchors provide an origin for UI elements. This means that elements are always in the same place regardless of screen size. So notice that when I change my aspect ratio, so right now new text is 91 pixels to the left and 57 pixels up from the center. No matter what I do with my aspect ratio, it's always 97 pixels up or to the left and 57 pixels above the origin. If I move my anchor to, say, the bottom left, my position changes. Now my text is 337 pixels to the right and 325 pixels up. So if I go in and change my aspect ratio now, notice that because my anchor is in the bottom left, the text actually moves. Sometimes with smaller aspect ratios, it's closer towards the middle. With larger aspect ratios, it's farther to the left, because the anchor point down here, the text is only positioning itself 337 pixels this way and 325 pixels this way. So changing the aspect ratio actually affects how centrally located the text can be. Anchors are a very, very powerful tool because they always allow our UI to be displayed consistently. So even if we're dealing with different screen resolutions, it doesn't matter because our UI element positions itself based on the anchor, not based on the number of pixels on your screen. So it's really, really useful in that way. Talking about anchors a little bit more, though, we have two different types of anchors. The first type of anchor is called a together anchor. So a together anchor is a single point of origin. UI element stays the same size. So no matter what here, my UI element will not scale will not get any bigger or smaller no matter what the screen size does. As long as it's positioned near the anchor component, you can see that the width will always be 160 and the height will always be 30. And our anchor values are all the same. Now, if I take this anchor and I grab one of its points, do something like this, and I'm going to move the text. I'm going to move the text inside of here. Now, notice that height and width went away. Now the text is located 135 pixels, or 13.5 pixels to the left, from the left, 27 pixels from the top, 183 pixels from the bottom, or 53 pixels from the bottom rather, and 183 pixels from the right. So now this is called a split anchor. Split anchors allow us to organize UI elements inside a zone, and it resizes based on the size of the zone. I'm not sure if it'll work well with text. What you guys will notice is that if we were adding images here, it would be a lot more obvious. But let's see if we can make this change a little bit. I don't think it's going to, because the text font size is all the same size. So with an image, let's actually try it. Let's add a UI image in here. So there's our UI image, and I'm going to go stretch this over here, bottom right. And we're going to take this image and we're going to stick it in this spot. Now it's 110 from the left, 44 from the right, 24 from the top, and 10 from the bottom. So let's see if we get some resizing in here now. So now, if I drop the aspect ratio, there we go. We can see, so the text is a fixed font size, which is why we're not seeing a change here. But notice that the dimensions of the component itself change based on the aspect ratio, because it's trying to maintain these positions. As the aspect ratio shrinks, it becomes harder to maintain 110 from the left and 44 from the right. So with a skinnier aspect ratio, to be able to do this, it has to squeeze itself. It has to shrink. So if we want our UI elements to scale with our screen, then we want to use split anchors. If we want our UI elements to always be the same size and to be in the same place, then we want to keep the anchors together. And notice that if we want to fine-tune the anchors, we can do so here. So 1 in any of these values means 100% of the screen, and 0.5 means half the screen, etc. So keep that in mind, that you can manipulate these numerically if you want a really, really precise anchor. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about using a script here. I am going to add a script, new script, and I'm going to call this script text. I'm going to call this script label. Create it. And this is just an alternate way of creating a script component and combining it at the same time. We could have done what we've done in the past, made the script over here and then dragged it on, but that's just an alternate way of doing it. So I'm going to open up my label here. And we're just going to do some quick programmatic changes. But I want to point something out. Even though the UI elements have different transforms, so they behave in a very different way, at their core, they are still just game objects. So if we look at our text component, if we look at text here, this is just a component. It's just a, I'm going to add some default text that says, nothing is happening. This is just a component attached to a game object. It's nothing new. The only difference is the idea that the transform behaves in a slightly different way. So let's take a look at our label object. I'm going to do a couple of things here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a, I'm trying to remember what these guys are called. Okay, Gui Text. So I'm going to get a Gui Text component. So this is going to represent the text component. And I'm going to call it text. And in the start method, I am going to set it equal to the text component. So I'm going to say get component, and this is a text GUI text, I believe, component that we want. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say if input dot get axis vertical. So if the vertical axis is not 0, In other words, I'm pressing up or down or W or S. Then I want to set the text dot text. Here we go. Whoa, easy there. Text dot text equal to we are moving up or down. The question mark, because why not? So what this is going to do is every time update runs, it's going to check the vertical axis. If the vertical axis is not 0, it's going to set the text. Otherwise, text.text equals we have stopped. Again, nothing new is going on here. All we're doing is taking a new type of variable, a Gui text, which is, let's find it here. This component, and it looks like this component is not big enough because we're getting some overflow here. So I like to resize this guy. Let's drop this down to 0. There we go. Now we got plenty of space. Nothing is happening, and our GUI text object, or type, refers to this text component. So all I'm doing is taking my text component, and it has a value. It has a property called text. I should have renamed this variable, because now I'm going to rename it. Text component. Just so we're clear, this is the component. So inside that text component, we're getting the text property, which is the string, and we're setting it equal to a new string. So let's try it. Okay, minor update, guys. I was grabbing the wrong type. I was forgetting what that type was called. It's not a GUI text. I had to make a couple of quick changes to the code that I just wrote. We have to add this import statement, so using unityengine.ui, and the component is just called text. So everywhere where I was writing GUI text before, that's actually text. So let's make sure I put that in here. Text component can be programmed, must add the unityengine.ui namespace. And then we can get it by doing get component of type text. A little note for myself so I don't forget that that's what it's actually called. So let's stop this. Let's save and run it again. There we go. We have stopped. Good. So that's working. We are moving up or down. We have stopped. We are moving up or down. You guys can't see it, but I'm pressing the W and S keys. So there we have programmatically manipulated our script. And just like with that, all of these different UI elements, and we're going to go over a couple in the upcoming videos, but all of these UI elements are basically special types. They're just different components. So here we have an image component that we can use, a text component, and if I were to do buttons or things like that, I'm going to add scripts and that allow me to control custom functionality with the buttons. But here all we've done is created a text element and gotten the component from the object. Remember that this only works because this script is attached to the text object. So when get component is called, get component searches the game object that it is attached to, and it says, oh look, here's a text component, and then it assigns this variable, text component, a reference to the text that's attached to this game object, and then we're able to manipulate it here. So I think that wraps up our first lesson on anchors and the text UI element and the canvas. Thanks for watching.